Okay, in this video, what causes AIDS and what is secret cure? First, I'm going to play a recent news clip from Atlanta, 2024.
Present his case later on this month. Right now on 11 Alive, Metro Atlanta is the third highest ranking for HIV diagnosis in the country. So this is according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Local clinics say they are already seeing more positive cases. Otherwise traceables, as live with us in studios explain why even healthcare officials are shocked at these numbers.
Well, Jennifer, I want to provide some context here. Though the data is most recently available, the information is from 3 years ago. So I set to find out what Atlanta's cases look like today. HIV may not look like it did 30 or 40 years ago, but Atlanta expressed its shock when observing a recent trend.
This quarter, for 2024, we've already reported more positive individuals living with HIV than we did the quarter in 2023.
AIDS Atlanta mostly serves Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton counties, so if we take it beyond Atlanta to the metro Atlanta area, recent Centers for Disease Control and Prevention statistics really puts things into perspective. A spokesperson for the CDC says, quote, the Atlanta, Sandy Springs, Alpharetta, Georgia metro political statistical area was third nationally for HIV diagnosis in 2021, right behind Miami and Memphis. Dwayne Ford is the director of HIV prevention services with AIDS Atlanta.
We're all trying to figure out, why we're getting more people that are diagnosed with HIV when we know there are more prevention tools out there.
When you expand it to the entire state, current preliminary data shows Georgia is fourth in the country for HIV diagnosis. Concerned residents started sharing this information all over social media. Some saying they're now afraid to date here.
There's fear, and that's with anything that's unknown. HIV does have a stigma.
It's important to note that this same data shows infections are 12% lower in 2021 than they were in 2017. But there were still some pandemic restrictions in place that could be playing a role in that data. Still, Ford wants to remind everyone that this disease is not a death sentence.
The message continues to be the same as it always has been. Prevention methods
Change your lifestyle.
Ford suggests talking with your healthcare providers about preventative medications, such as PrEP, so you can protect yourself. There are also resources in the city to help with the cost of testing.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, so let's get to the cure. They're talking about drugs, and many options out there. And I would suggest, you can see this. This is a book that I read where I'm taking most of my material from. It's called Rising from the Dead. Rising from the Dead by Suzanne Humphrey, MD. And quite an impressive MD at that. She got a degree in physics and chemistry, and it goes on to get a doctorate or master's in nephrology. Just highly impressive. And in her writings, I took some notes on AIDS. She had a section on AIDS. But, as far as a news clip, they're talking about an increase in AIDS in Atlanta. They spent the city spent to the tune of $20,000 for a rainbow sidewalk recently. I said, since when did taxpayers have to pay for anything sexual? A sexual matter. That used to stay contained in the bedroom, or better yet, a closet. Movies traditionally are assigned X ratings due to sexual content. Why not protect kids on our sidewalks as well from X-rated material? Stop desecrating a rainbow as well. A rainbow is a promise from God. Why use that symbol of all the symbols, that one, which he himself considers to be, in his own words, worse than an abomination? I'll never forget my dad. he had on the top of his head 30 passages in the Bible speaking out against homosexuality, which is just more proof of their evil intent using that symbol. But back to the book. I'm going to read you now, quoting. First off, she says, Suzanne Humphrey says, people were immunocompromised prior to being infected with HIV. There were many New York patients, for example, who were constantly on antibiotics. Promiscuity in both male and female is in itself immunosuppressive. Their lifestyles were suppressing their immune system so much that any virus, including HIV, might have potential to cause havoc. Simply meaning that lifestyle, being homosexual or being highly promiscuous, depresses your immune system. Today, I know this is her talking, she knows a huge population of HIV positive people who are actually falsely positive on testing, and some who were legitimately with AIDS, who greatly improved by simply changing their lifestyle from being homosexual, and in addition to good nutrition and vitamins. But many, were making careers by playing with antiviral drugs, but not much attention on lifestyle. They didn't study lifestyle. The doctor's industry and academic worked together to mold careers around the blood of sick people. And that a true cure for many conditions is not only unprofitable, but also undesirable. Desbars, D-U-E-S-B-E-R-S, doctor, he's a doctor, was in an ivory club receiving awards and accolades until he challenged the wide accepted belief that HIV is the cause of AIDS, and argued that HIV is a passenger virus. Carey Mullis, inventor of the PCR, polymerase chain reaction, you might know from the COVID testing, also had sympathy for Desbar's theory. But most questioning HIV and AIDS, or vaccines for that matter, are tossed into a conspiracy bin regardless of their reputation or accomplishments. As another example, she did a lot of research on poliovirus, and many studies show that other things can cause paralysis, and there was no poliovirus at all found in the majority of people diagnosed with it. Other enteroviruses like oxacal B are found in the paralyzed. There are published cases of lead poisoning that were initially diagnosed as polio. And she found recent papers linking agricultural chemicals to polio-like symptoms. In China, what was thought of as polio was really a selenium deficiency. I'm going to, by the way, I might mention that I also have a degree in science myself, biology and double minor in chemistry. And several years back I did a report on water quality, water quality, and when I found, my theory was about testing, this bacteria that I kept getting, actinomycetes, which I'll turn to now. Let's see, go over this report here. And the reason I bring it up is because when I summarized a report to one of my old neighbors, her sister worked for the CDC, she informed me that that same bacteria, actinomycetes, had been making a lot of the AIDS patients around Atlanta sick. Oops. And why bring this report up? Well, I guess I can knock down all you dominoes with one shot. The government here is claiming, health and to support homosexuals, but don't even treat the water correctly, thus making them sick. I mean, I'm going to point out the time I was doing this testing and report, the city of Atlanta was paying 10,000 fines to the EPA of $10,000 a day for being out of compliance because it was just simply cheaper to pay the fine than fix the problem. And whereas in Europe, where they use activated carbon, it cleans the water so much more. In addition to bacteria, it also kills chemicals. But the U.S. Thinks it's too expensive. No, they're too worried about continued money dumped into the DOT and this ridiculous road work over and over and over again, like here on 75, where it's never ending, even though there's nothing wrong with the roads. But that's another issue, right? So I titled this paper, Determination of Spore Formation in Wastewater Effluent After Chlorination. And the introduction is, it's my theory that the chlorination process itself in wastewater treatment induces bacteria to form spores, rendering them immune to a disinfectant and resulting in their discharge in lakes and rivers and water tap. What I did was I compared wastewater effluent from plants using chlorination and ones using alternative methods. In addition, secondary and tertiary wastewater treatment will be evaluated, since with less treatment, more bacteria should remain behind to produce spores during chlorination. So in Atlanta, the last time I did this report, they only did secondary treatment and then chlorination, whereas where I live and some other places, they go on after secondary and use tertiary treatment, which usually sand beds instead of using granular activated carbon like they do in Europe. But it's still more filtration. And then there's one plant that actually uses, instead of chlorine, they use ultraviolet light. Okay, and that was my introduction. Okay, and then my conclusion was, after testing, that based on the data results, my hypothesis was supported. In particular, it was hypothesized that gram-positive spores and or actinomycete spores will be observed in higher concentrations in the wastewater effluent due to the chlorination process of various wastewater plants. Both bacterial and spore numbers were expected to be lower with the plants using, like I said, the better treatment, tertiary treatment, or ultraviolet light. What I came up with was a lot of my plates, bacterial plates, had a lot of these actinomycete spores. So let me go to that one. Oh, spore formation. Whoops. Yeah. Here. Tertiary. Here it is, spore formation. Okay, this is the one I meant to mention here. Spore-forming bacteria are primarily soil inhabitants. Some examples of spores are genus Bacillus, which is what I came up with. Spores are resistant to UV light and disinfectants. Okay. Thermoactinomycetes are unlike other actinomycete spores because they form true endospores and are very heat resistant. They're also the causative agent of farmer's lung disease and allergic reaction to the respiratory system. Their cell wall varies greatly among different groups. They're generally soil inhabitants, and they resemble fungi. All right, so I'm going to show the charts. I've produced some charts. And here we go. What we got here was, for instance, presence of Bacillus endospores from okay, the first graph is from the secondary treatment with chlorine. You've got a high number, and then tertiary treatment with chlorine, much lower. And then on down to tertiary treatment with UV ultraviolet light, essentially 0. Okay, next chart. Bacterial numbers in effluent versus secondary, tertiary treatment. Okay, we've got, again, secondary treatment with chlorine, tertiary treatment, chlorine, tertiary treatment with UV light, much lower. Okay, next graph, spore formation in effluent. Okay, first graph, secondary treatment with chlorine, very high. Tertiary treatment with chlorine, much lower. And then essentially 0 again, tertiary treatment with UV. And then we got presence of actinomycetes, which is the ones that were apparently making the AIDS patient sick. You've got a high number here, secondary treatment with chlorine, which is much of your Atlanta treatment. With UV, essentially 0. See? And then I did one more, I did a chi-square analysis test. Okay, whoops. Under my conclusions were that a chi-square test came out positive, meaning that the difference in numbers is significantly different, and that it is possible that chlorine indeed plays a role here in spore formation. Another thing, quickly, is currently wastewater plants only test for fecal coliforms. That's what they all told me when I was doing my research. In effluent waters. Since bacillus and actinomycetes are normally found in soil, I was unsure of their origin in effluent. All the wastewater labs questioned did not know, all the ones I questioned did not know of any bacteria in the effluent other than fecal coliforms. So of course, they don't test for them. Currently, acceptable limits are 200 fecals per 100 mils of effluent are allowable. I calculated, oh God, was this 268,000 per 100 mils in the Clayton plant. 23,000 per 100 mils in the Sutton effluent. 7,000 per 100 mils at Southside. A question here is, are any of these pathogenic, since it is known that some actinomycetes and bacilli are pathogenic? And finally, another factor supporting the hypothesis is that spores are resistant to UV radiation, so that there were then no spores entering the UV plant, because if they were and they're resistant to UV, they would have exited the plant, but I came up with none. So logic would then follow that no spores entered the other plants either, and that something caused them to become spores, whereas my hypothesis was spore that it's possibly chlorine. By the way, that's why we should be using granular activated carbon. There would be much less material to be combined with chlorine. But anyways, I just thought I would bring that up about that making the AIDS patient sick. Moral of the story here, change your lifestyle. Change your lifestyle and you won't be sick. Thank you very much.